thanks for coming out. We just wanted to meet with you. I'm sure some of you have some questions as we start special session. We think it's important as we continue through this process to look at what we've accomplished so far. One of the things that we keep people are trying to figure out how does this work as far as special session. And the one thing that I think we've been really clear about is if you look at the Senate and the way that we came about with a budget, we've made a lot of compromises already. So a lot of people are thinking, well, do you take the Senate budget and the House budget and do you do the traditional, let's split them in half and meet somewhere in the middle? But if you look at the Senate budget, when we came out, there's 21 Republicans that voted for it, 9 Democrats. That's about as bipartisan as you get these days in American politics. And if you look at the House budget, it was very much a party line vote. And so a lot of the compromises that we made as Andy Hill and Jim Hargrove and Sharon Nelson and others met on a nightly basis, we've made a lot of those compromises. So it is kind of a different situation than you might typically see here in Olympia. So we're proud of the work we did. That's not to say that our budget is the only thing that we're willing to do and there's no compromise. We understand that anytime there's differences that you're going to have to find creative ways to somehow have a meeting of the minds. But we think that from the Senate standpoint, we created a budget that lived within the means. If you looked at where voters were in November, it was very clear with the votes on the 2/3 that voters, their first instinct wasn't for new taxes. And the other song and dance that you've heard so long in Olympia is that we need to do this for the kids. And in the Senate budget, we had over $1 billion in new dollars that went towards McCleary. And so we think that we did what the public sent us down here to do, and that is make sure our budget gets reprioritized with a heavy investment in not only K through 12, but higher education, and live within your means. And we did that as a Senate budget. I don't know if there's...
I think that summarizes a lot of the things. We've been all about reforms related to jobs, education, and budgets. That if you look at, for example, the Washington State Institute for Public Policy said, if we increased state spending for K-12 by 10%, starting with this year's kindergarten class, when they graduate, we would only reduce dropout rates by 2%. That's not a very good return on investment as a standalone expenditure. But if you look at some reforms that were all bipartisan that came out of here, they make those K-12 dollars even more valuable if you attach the solid policy reforms to it that we know we need.
Jumping in there, I'll follow up with that because I think it is a point of significant difference between the approach that was taken in the Senate and that which was taken in the House. When you look at the McCleary decision, the court interpreted our constitutional responsibility in predominantly 3 ways. It certainly did ample funding. There's no question about that. And as Senator Tom points out, we've hit that hard, as has the House. There's no question about that. But there's 2 other areas that it talks about. One is that we've got to bring in the reforms that will deliver outcomes for kids. As Senator Schoesler brought up, we did that. I don't think if you look at the bills coming out of the House, I don't think you've seen that. It's a clear requirement in McCleary. We've got to be delivering for our students. And the third thing is they certainly talk about how we have pushed our responsibility to fund our schools back on our local school districts, that over-reliance on local levies. And in the Senate budget and with bills that we have passed off the Senate floor, you see that we're going to change that. We're making a step forward to ramp down that over-reliance on our local funding. So I think you can see that in the Senate, we've got a more holistic and appropriate solution, not only for McCleary, but really for the kids of the state of Washington.
Does your caucus talk today about transportation, and are you guys now open to moving a transportation revenue package through in this special session?
We were primarily focused today on updating our members on the budgets, operating capital budgets, and what the schedule might look like during special session. We'll be talking about it, but right now the reason you're all gathered here is because of the budget, and that was our priority in caucusing today.
Okay, you've got two important forecasts coming up on June 18th. One of them the caseload forecast, the other one the revenue forecast. What's the chance that anybody here in Olympia is going to get done with the budget before you get those two big sets of numbers?
I've always been an optimist, and I will continue to be an optimist. That had this discussion with another member of the press today that I'm a half full glass guy. I'm a farmer. The weather's always going to get better, and commodity prices will too. So I like to retain that optimism and not predict the worst right out of the chute.
And there's some other dates, obviously, that come forward. I think Senator Danmeyer had talked earlier today as far as June 15th is a day that it's important for school districts because they need to make some decisions as far as personnel. And do they need to do a RIF or do they not in making those kind of decisions? So we extended that out, I think last year from May 15th to June 15th, but that will be coming on us. So there's going to be a lot of dates around that time period, but I think that as long as we stay focused on the budget and the issues related to the budget and the reforms to move Washington forward, we can get the job done.
You talk about having compromised already with the Senate budget, but the fact is you got another House and you guys have to come to some agreement, even if this has had bipartisan support on this side. Are you willing to give on revenue? Are you willing to allow some tax loopholes to be closed to get to a deal?
Right now on revenue, I think we've put together a budget that doesn't require revenue. There's things out there that always happen in the mix. As far as the internal discussions with that, we've been pretty clear with the governor and others as far as the budget negotiations that we weren't going to negotiate the budget in the media. So as far as what type of internal discussions we're having, but as far as a caucus, we've been very clear, all of our members, that we think we can do this in a responsible manner in looking at what the voters have wanted, and that is focus on jobs, education, the budget, moving Washington forward, and do it in a manner that doesn't hurt an economy that is very volatile at this point in time.
And keep in mind with revenue too, I will just remind everyone, we already have $2 billion of additional revenue coming into our state. So we already have more revenue to work with. And it's about living within our means.
And Janaea, she can talk about some of the really important reform bills as far as on the jobs front. One of the things that we've been clear about is, we're not going to buy our way to a great economy. And that's why we think we can do this in a responsible, sustainable way from a budget standpoint if you include some of the reforms like, Janaea's been advocating for. And I don't know if you want to talk about, some of the ones that, we've had on the table, but,
Sure.
I think they're important.
Yeah, bottom line, one of our number one priorities was job creation, and we're talking about private sector job creation because that's really what's going to drive our state forward in regards to our economy. And we've got some great members here that have had some bills. Senator Brown, one of our dynamite freshmen from the Tri-Cities, she's got business portal bills. We've got a lot of these common sense pieces of legislation that actually pass out unanimously. We also, of course, have some that tend to be more controversial, but I see just as a step forward, incremental step forward, building on what we've done in the past, such as structured settlements for workers' compensation. Right now we're facing, it was about a $1.1 billion deficit in our contingency reserve. Now it's at $720 million deficit because we did have a little bit more in state investment returns. But bottom line, as we're talking about revenue, we've got to remember that money comes from the same wallets when we're talking to the citizens and the employers in our state. So in regards to workers' compensation, when we're facing a over $700 million deficit in our contingency reserve, which will mean hundreds of millions of dollars of tax increases if we don't address it, that's a message too, is that this is something that we could address. We've got the solution. It was sent out with 30 votes, 5127, that builds upon our current structured settlement. It allows more injured workers a voluntary option, and it will help capture some cost savings and prevent those rate increases. So not only are we trying to live within our means, in regards to getting our economy down the road in the right direction, we're trying to prevent future tax increases that are looming, and that's why it's really important that we get these bipartisan solutions to the governor's desk.
Governor Inslee described the past 2 weeks as the result being, well, while we now agree on some basic assumptions on how much things would cost, that seems to me, and I would say that it would seem to the public, that's a very minuscule amount of work that got done in the 2 weeks. Have you guys, has anyone made any actual horse trading or concessions or?
John, two points. We were very clear before the end of the regular session that we preferred everybody to come back and get to work because deadlines create pressure to get something done. The second thing is that we're not going to negotiate the status or anything else through the press. So what goes on there, our conferees have said we're not going to do it, and neither will leadership.
Has anyone made any concessions at all?
John, we are
I'm not
not
asking
going
for
to
details, I'm
negotiate.
just asking to see if there's any
they're-
movement at all.
They're working hard. I believe that they have made progress, same as the governor. We are not negotiating in the press.
Okay, so I'm assuming there's no progress in actual horse trading.
Well, we can be optimists or we can be pessimists.
Senator
Okay.
Tom, you mentioned having already made concessions. Where has your team made a concession of substance so far?
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at just the budget in general, probably, if we were simply to look at a 25-vote strategy, it would have been a very different budget than, you look at Medicaid expansion. There was a lot of members of our caucus that, they came in here thinking that, they don't like Obamacare and they don't want to advance it. So I that's a pretty major lift for our caucus. So I think that there was a lot of give and take in that room, and I think it is a very different budget. I think it'd be an interesting exercise if the House was to go out there and try to get a 1/3, 2/3 budget and see what those numbers look like. But that's what the people expect us to do, is work together, and that's what we did as a Senate. But we don't want that to then be held against us to think that from a negotiation standpoint, oh, well, you should just split the difference. No, I mean, we've already made those compromises. If you really want to look at if it was a 25-vote budget, then the middle's going to be a very different ground. And so I think people need to look at it that it's going to be a very different negotiation, just because I think we've gone through a lot of those iterative steps.
And even
at the
in our
Senate.
reform bills, the workers' comp, I'll just use that as another example. Our original bill would have allowed structured settlements for all injured workers regardless of age, which is what the majority of other states in our nation allow. And again, we met in the middle with some of our Democrat colleagues and accepted their amendment to do the age to 40. So again, all along, even in our pro-business bills, we've met in the middle and been good in regards to moderating our positions.
And that-
Schoesler, what did you tell your members today as to what to expect logistically for the next couple of weeks? Did you say to stick around? Did you say be on
Yeah.
call?
We told them to stay flexible. We're looking at the ability to use teleconferencing to avoid costs of per diem and travel, along with people that physically need to be here, and to stay loose. Be available on short notice to teleconference or physically be here.
Okay, this is another logistic type question too. The resolution that was passed this afternoon requires you to repass a lot of the bills that basically got jammed up over in the House. I'm thinking that there were actually a few of those that were relatively controversial, like the family leave one, the workers' comp one, and at least one of the education reform bills. So I'm wondering, are you anticipating any dramas as you repass all of those bills?
We'll go back and examine them when we get to a point in the session that a deal starts coming together. Very few of them were 25, 24 votes. And if it's part of a final budget package, it certainly will come together even easier.
Right, so it's not something that you're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks, but rather toward the end.
As we
when you've got everything.
see how final solution ends up, then we can move forward on those pieces that truly fit. And I think many of them will.
Are there certain reform bills that your caucus must have this session that you want to see passed this session?
Well, I think you can look at what we passed out of the Senate. I think we've been very clear as far as staying with our original message that we have not wavered from as far as focusing on jobs, education, and the budget.
So every bill that passed last session.
No,
has to
I
pass
think
this
that there's a
session.
list out there, and again, that's one of those lists that Senator Hill and Senator Braun are, delivering to the negotiation team right now as far as, what our priority bills are. But, it's a long list, but again, the reason why it's long is because there's a lot of, you look at, I was at the governor's aerospace kickoff on Thursday, and we are not going to be able to buy our way in Washington State. We need to reform our way in Washington State, because if we think there's just not enough tax dollars out there to think that we're going to be able to buy our way. And there's a lot of things. You look at unemployment insurance, workers' comp, we're simply not competitive with the rest of the country. And in an economy where companies are fluid, and have the ability to move and are enticed to move, you need to have an environment that makes them want to stay here, and that that's an environment where they're comfortable with the general tax rate. You have a great school system, and the other things that we're able to offer as a state.
On the CRC, Governor Inslee indicated possible state support for upriver businesses. Does that make the CRC project more palatable to you, Senator Rivers, or to your caucus?
Well, I think to a certain point we have to really look at what that state support looks like. If we could take that money and make a better project where those businesses wouldn't have to relocate to, say, Corpus Christi, Texas, or Louisiana, then I think that you could get there. But I think anything that moves those businesses out of that area is going to be problematic. I don't think that we've had a real discussion about mitigation. I think some ideas have been thrown around, but the last idea that I heard from the government was the first idea that was actually removed from the table. So it's a little unclear at this point. I understand that the governor did have a mitigation discussion last Friday with one of the companies, but didn't meet with others of the companies. So it's hard to say where that's going to go. I do not see a transportation package this year that includes funding for the Columbia River crossing.
Speaking about a potential transportation package, though, and one of the things that makes a lot of sense would be the completion of 161 and the 509. That recognizes the importance of trade in our state, and that as a key to jobs, which makes all the sense in the world. It's right in line with our priorities. Then why would you even consider a tax on interstate commerce? Why would you be trying to take something where we're fighting to be competitive and then put a tax on it and cost some of those jobs we're trying to create by expanding and strengthening our infrastructure? Those are some of the things in the tax programs that are going around that don't make sense.
Governor, on Sine Die, and some of you commented, the governor, when he talked about what was going to be in special session, it seemed like a laundry list, a very long list. Today, he focused himself on 3 issues: operating budget, transportation, and the impaired drivers. He did not mention for the first time the guns, DREAM Act, RPA. What's your reaction to the fact that he's dropped them from his public conversation? Is that a concession in your mind?
I call that progress.
Senator Tone?
No, we're here to get the people's job done. I don't think we're down here to, battle. We're here to get a budget that is responsible, that lives within our means, and moves Washington forward. And I think we can do that working together, and that's what we're trying to do is find, we're not trying to create situations of separation. We're trying to figure out how can we bridge the gaps that are there and do them in a manner that still moves Washington forward.
Governor Inslee talked about having a compromise on the drunken driving bill within the next couple days. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think if you look at it, and we just had a briefing in caucus today on that bill, it's coming together, but like all of these, I think what you're going to see is it's all going to be part of a package at the end as far as all these bills tied together. I don't think you're going to see, that bill in itself pass out, in the next week. And head to the governor's desk. I think it's all part of a package. Well, we got to look at one. We don't have a fiscal note on it. We're trying to get the fiscal ramifications again. And, you know, there's stuff out there that we're trying to get answers to.
Like what?
Well, as far as just trying to get data points, you know, if you look at one of the things that we've tried to do this year, and that is be much more data-driven in our decision-making process, and looking at, you know, of all the different elements out there, you got this 24/7 program out there where people, you know, wear a wrist bracelet and it communicates through the cell phone and Bluetooth, and, you know, how much of a difference does that make? As far as on the impounds, if you don't let out the impound before an interlock is, you know, how much of a difference does that make? Reducing from 5 to 4 as far as the felony count, and trying to figure out, just from a data-driven standpoint, where are the cost drivers and how much of a difference are they making, so that, you know, we can look people in the eye when we're looking at all these programs and saying, you know, we're just not doing this on a whim or just because it happens to be in the news right now, but really trying to take a detailed business, you know, mannerism to it, and in making intelligent decisions.
Okay, but a lot of the risk thing and the interlock, is there data? Does data even exist on those things? I've never even heard the risk thing until a few weeks ago, and I mean, these are brand new types of
No, I
things.
think Senator Patton has said that they have other states that these have been used in. And the important thing, you know, I told Senator Patton a long time ago, the most important part of this bill is not to get it out date specific, but to get it out right. And that's why there's going to be a thorough public hearing with nothing else crowding the agenda, that everybody that has an interest in DUI legislation will have lots of time. They won't have to quit to hear another bill. Then we're going to go to Ways and Means with it, because it has state and local government budget implications. And really look at those budget implications before we rush to passage. So I think it's something that's moving together nicely, but good public hearings and a policy and a fiscal committee are absolutely the right thing to do.
I mean,
Would it
just
be fair
in
to say this is about bargaining chip with the other side?
No, I don't think it's a bargaining chip at all, but we want to do it right. And, you know, just in conversations with members, you know, people have a lot of great ideas out there. One of the ideas that I don't think anybody had talked about that we heard today in caucus, just in conversation on it, was, well, maybe we have a provision in there when it comes to elected officials. If you're caught with a DUI, that's grounds for a recall. You know, that's something that isn't in that bill that maybe it should be. As leaders, we should be showing first and foremost that, you know, if we're passing these laws, we're not breaking these laws. And so there's a lot of great ideas that are out there that we want to make sure that we incorporate them, not only to get the, you know, the best for the public, but also so that we can show leadership from our end.
How is Mike Carroll doing? Will we see him here on the floor during the special session?
No, his recovery period from his bone marrow transplant takes longer than that. I think worst case scenario is we're here long enough to see Mike Carroll on the floor. Really worst.
Okay.
Does anybody here have a guess on how long it's going to take?
You know what, on Mike Carroll or on the...
Oh, no, I'm getting out of here.
I think I said it before, Eric, I'm the optimist. I'll keep being optimistic that it comes together quickly and won't say a disparaging word about not.
But again, you know, I think it's more important to get it done right than to get it done, you know, expediently. You know, 5 years from now, you know, I think people will look back and say, you know, they're not going to go, well, they were, you know, 20 days later than they should have been. What they're going to say is, you know, did they do education right? Did they do the budget right? Did they move Washington State right? Did they do right for our small companies in Washington State to make sure that they had an environment where they could grow jobs and not inhibit jobs? So I think that's really our focus, is on getting it right. But I think we can get it right, you know, in that 30-day period.
But isn't this sort of a reverse of what you guys were saying during the regular session? It was like, we got to get out, but we have to have everything done by 105 days. And that was pretty much the mantra through the regular session, that if you went into overtime, that was a illegal, immoral fattening and just plain
Well, you know,
bad.
John, really, the reality is that we were done.
Yep.
And we worked very hard. That was our goal. That's everything that we did, all of our reforms, our budgeting, all of that was done well in advance of the 105th day. Not everyone else had the same goal. So I think that our caucus is in this for the long haul. We're going to continue working and moving forward and helping others to see the wisdom of our ways and watching the people of the state benefit from that.
Given that, do you think Senator Hill's proposal to move up the March revenue forecast would help this process at all, get it done faster, or is that not something that even is the problem?
No,
Of course. I mean, I think the way it happened to fall this year, that was a great reform that didn't require changing the Constitution or anything. Just move it up so that it doesn't fall that late during the 105-day session again is a good reform, easily attained.
One more question.
You say you want to do things right. Is it right to have a tax system in a state that's growing that is not sort of keeping up at all with the growth in the economy and that continues to starve government and force you to make the kinds of tough decisions that have caused the House and Senate to be in the position they're in right now?
First of all, we haven't starved government. $1.7 billion more, Brad, is not starvation. And if the public is to trust government with reforms, with changes, we have to earn their trust. Now, if people are told the B&O tax is for 3 years and it goes away, and we don't follow through, they're going to be very cynical about accepting any changes to our tax system in the future, because temporary really means temporary to most people. And that will ruin any attempts to reconfigure a tax system or accept other policy changes in the future.
I'm a small business owner. I have a printing company. We're thrilled if we can get 6 or 7% growth, right? And I know probably all the citizens that I know would love to get a 6 or 7% pay raise. Why is that not enough for the state of Washington?
And I'll also mention that 2 days before the regular session ended, the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics released its quarterly update on unemployment, and it rated all the states, and in its broadest definition, we were ranked 5th highest in unemployment. So again, this is a sign that our state has a lot of room for improvement in regards to our business-friendly outlook for our employers, and a lot of work to be done. And again, why our focus, one of our top focuses, was private sector job creation. And why those reforms are so important, and why living within our means also fits into that.
And what Janae is referring to there is you have a U3 unemployment figure is usually the figure that you guys and the public generally refer to when we talk about unemployment. The broader definition as far as displaced workers, those who are part-time, is called a U6 figure. In Washington State, we rank 5th. And so we do have a lot of work. And that's why we're trying to be so careful in, again, saying that we can't buy our way out of this. What we need to do is reform our way and do it from a responsible fiscal manner that's sustainable and moves Washington forward so that we can create jobs and not inhibit them.
And that ranking was over the last 12 months. So we're ranked 5th over the last 12 months.
So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.